6 months after that rainy night, Sarah Mitchell Cooper stood in the kitchen of what was now officially her home, watching her husband help their 5 children decorate a cake for what they decided to call their family birthday. The anniversary of the day, they all became a family. Husband. The word still felt new on her tongue, even though they'd been married for 2 months. It had been Emma who'd suggested it, actually, asking one morning over breakfast why James wasn't Sarah's husband if he was their dad, and she was his mom. Because grown-ups are complicated, sweetheart, Sarah had said. But Emma, with the clarity that only children possess, had tilted her head and said, "But you love each other, right? And we're all a family? So why wouldn't you be married?" Why indeed? Sarah and James had looked at each other across the breakfast table, surrounded by the chaos of 5 children getting ready for school, and realized that Emma was absolutely right. They did love each other, not the desperate, passionate love of movies, but something deeper and more stable. The love of 2 people who had chosen each other every day for months, who had built something beautiful together out of the wreckage of their separate struggles. The proposal had been wonderfully unromantic. James had been helping Lucy with a particularly stubborn shoelace while Sarah packed lunches, and he'd looked up and said, "We should probably make this official, shouldn't we?" Make what official? Sarah had asked, though her heart was already beating faster. This, us, the family we've built. I know it's not traditional, and maybe it's too soon, but I can't imagine my life without you and Emma and Michael and Lucy in it. Tyler and Chloe can't either. Sarah had looked around the kitchen at the beautiful chaos of their morning routine, backpacks and permission slips and half-eaten toast, and Tyler helping Michael find his library book and Chloe braiding Emma's hair. This life they'd created together, this family that had grown from desperation into something magnificent. Yes, she'd said. Yes, we should make it official. They'd married in the backyard 2 months later, with just the children and a few close friends in attendance. Emma and Chloe had been flower girls, wearing matching purple dresses they'd picked out together. Tyler and Michael had been ring bearers, taking their job so seriously that they'd practiced walking in slow, measured steps for weeks beforehand. Lucy had been the honorary wedding planner, suggesting everything from the flowers, sunflowers, because they were happy, to the cake flavor, chocolate with strawberry filling, because it was everyone's favorite combination. Mrs. Patterson's daughter had attended the ceremony, bringing a casserole dish and a card that read, "Mom would have loved this. She always said the best families are the ones we choose." Now, standing in their kitchen on this ordinary Tuesday evening, watching James patiently guide 5 small hands in decorating what was definitely going to be a lopsided but beautiful cake, Sarah marveled at how normal this had all become. "Mom, can I put the sprinkles on this part?" Lucy asked, holding up a handful of rainbow sprinkles. "Of course, baby. Just try to get most of them on the cake instead of the counter." Tyler and Michael were carefully spelling out "Happy Family Birthday" in letter-shaped cookies around the edge of the cake. Emma and Chloe were taking turns with the frosting bag, creating what they insisted were flowers but looked more like colorful blobs. "This is going to be the best cake ever," Chloe declared, "even though it looks like a rainbow threw up on it." Tyler asked with a grin. "Especially because it looks like a rainbow threw up on it," Emma said solemnly, which made everyone dissolve into giggles. James caught Sarah's eye across the kitchen and smiled. These were the moments she treasured most, the ordinary ones, the everyday magic of children being children and family being family. "Remember when we were worried about whether the kids would get along?" he asked quietly. Sarah laughed. "Now they get along, so well we can't get them to stop planning things together. Did you see the fort they built in the living room yesterday? The one that required every sheet in the house, and somehow involved the kitchen chairs. That's the one. And they're already planning their summer camp application. Apparently, they want to go as a group." "Of course they do." James shook his head in amazement. "I still can't believe how seamlessly they bonded." It was true. The 5 children had become a unit, a pack, moving through their days with the easy coordination of siblings who had grown up together. They fought sometimes, of course. Michael and Tyler had had a spectacular argument about Legos just last week, and Emma and Chloe had gone through a phase of competing over who could read more books. But They also defended each other fiercely against outsiders, shared their toys and secrets and dreams, and couldn't imagine life without each other. I think kids are more adaptable than adults, Sarah said. We spent weeks worrying about logistics and boundaries and whether this was going to work. They just accepted that they were brothers and sisters now and moved on. The cake decorating was winding down, mostly because they'd run out of surface area that wasn't already covered in frosting, sprinkles, or cookie letters. The children stepped back to admire their handiwork, and Sarah had to admit it was perfect in its chaotic, colorful imperfection. "Can we eat it now?" Lucy asked hopefully. "After dinner," James said, which, speaking of, should probably be started soon. "Pizza," all 5 children shouted in unison. "We can't have pizza every time we celebrate something," Sarah protested, though she was already reaching for the phone. "Why not?" Michael asked. "It's tradition now." Tradition. They'd developed so many traditions over the past 6 months. Friday movie nights where they all piled onto the couch with popcorn and argued good-naturedly about what to watch. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts that lasted for hours. Bedtime stories where James did all the character voices and the children acted out the scenes. They'd also navigated the harder stuff together. Emma's nightmares about being homeless again had gradually faded with time and consistency. Michael's tendency to hoard food, just in case, had been gently addressed with patience and understanding. Lucy's separation anxiety had eased as she learned to trust that this home wasn't going anywhere. Tyler and Chloe had had their own adjustments to make. Sharing their dad with 3 new siblings hadn't always been easy, and there had been moments of jealousy and acting out. But James and Sarah had worked together to make sure each child felt seen and valued and secure in their place in the family. "Okay, pizza it is," Sarah conceded, dialing their usual order. "But we're having salad too." A chorus of groans rose from the children, but they were already scattering to set the table and clean up their cake decorating supplies. The teamwork that had developed between them never failed to amaze Sarah. They moved around each other with practiced ease, each child knowing their role in the family's daily operations. While they waited for the pizza to arrive, Sarah found herself looking around the house that had become home. The living room bore clear evidence of 5 children, toys in bins, books scattered on every surface, art projects taped to the walls. The refrigerator was covered in school papers, sports schedules, and family photos. The mudroom overflowed with backpacks, shoes, sports equipment, and the general detritus of a busy family. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for during those dark weeks when she'd thought they'd lost everything. "Penny for your thoughts," James said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "Just thinking about how different things are from 6 months ago," she said, accepting the wine gratefully. "Different how?" Sarah considered the question. 6 months ago, I was so focused on survival that I couldn't see past the next meal, the next place to sleep. I couldn't imagine a future where we weren't just barely hanging on." She looked around at their noisy, chaotic, wonderfully normal family dinner preparation. "Now I wake up every morning, and my first thought isn't about whether we'll have a place to sleep that night. It's about whether Tyler remembered to pack his soccer cleats, or if Emma needs help with her science project, or what I'm going to make for lunch. Normal parent worries instead of survival worries." James nodded. "I know what you mean. For years after Linda died, I felt like I was just treading water, keeping my head above the surface. Now it feels like we're all swimming in the same direction." The pizza arrived, and dinner was its usual controlled chaos. 5 children talking over each other, sharing stories from their day, arguing about who got the last piece of pepperoni pizza, and planning tomorrow's activities. James refereed disputes while Sarah made sure everyone actually ate some vegetables along with their pizza. "Can we call Grandma Sarah after dinner?" Chloe asked. "I want to tell her about my spelling test." Grandma Sarah was Sarah's mother, who had driven down from 3 states away a month after the wedding, worried about her daughter's sudden marriage to a stranger. She'd intended to stay for a weekend and make sure Sarah hadn't lost her mind. Instead, she'd been completely charmed by James and had fallen head over heels in love with her instant grandchildren. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, packing lunches for 5 children and trying not to panic about the parent-teacher conference she had scheduled for Emma that afternoon. The routine that had emerged felt both natural and surreal, making breakfast for 6 people, checking homework folders, signing permission slips for field trips she could actually afford to send her children on. "Mom, I can't find my blue shirt," Tyler called from upstairs. "It's in the laundry room," Sarah called back. "Clean clothes basket on the dryer." She paused, realizing what had just happened. Tyler had called her mom. Not Sarah, not Mrs. Mitchell, but Mom. It had been happening gradually, the way he and Chloe had started turning to her when they needed something, and James wasn't around. At first, she'd gently corrected them, reminding them she wasn't their mother. But James had pulled her aside and asked her to let it happen naturally. "Linda's been gone for 5 years," he'd said. "They barely remember having a mother figure in their daily lives. If they want to call you Mom, it's because you're filling that role for them. It doesn't diminish Linda's memory, it honors it." Now Emma came racing down the stairs, her hair half-braided. "Sarah, can you finish my braid?" Chloe started it, but she had to go brush her teeth. And there was the flip side, Emma, who had been calling James Dad for the past week, much to Sarah's initial alarm. But watching him help her with math homework the night before, seeing the gentle way he handled her questions and praised her efforts, Sarah had to admit that he was acting like a father to her children. This whole arrangement had become something none of them had expected. "Come here, sweetheart," Sarah said, setting down the sandwich she was making. She finished Emma's braid quickly, tying it with the purple hair tie Emma preferred. Michael wandered into the kitchen, fully dressed but with his backpack dragging behind him like he could barely lift it. "What's in there?" Sarah asked, lifting the bag. It weighed at least 20 pounds. "Tyler and me are doing a science project," Michael explained. "We're building a volcano that actually erupts. We need to bring supplies today." Tyler appeared in the kitchen, wearing his blue shirt and carrying a backpack that looked equally heavy. "Dad said we could use the big table in the garage to build it. Is that okay, Mom?" There it was again. "Mom." Sarah's heart did a little flip every time. "That's fine. But you boys need to clean up after yourselves. And make sure you protect the table surface." "We will," they said in unison, then looked at each other and grinned like they'd planned it. Lucy bounced into the kitchen wearing a dress that was definitely too fancy for school, but Sarah had learned to pick her battles. "Can I take my new book for show and tell?" "Which book?" "The one Dad read to us last night about the princess who rescued herself." "Dad." Lucy had started calling James Dad before any of the other children, with the easy acceptance that only a 4-year-old could manage. To her, James was simply the man who read her bedtime stories, helped her reach things on high shelves, and patiently answered her endless questions about why the sky was blue and where clouds came from. James emerged from his office, coffee cup in hand, looking slightly frazzled. "Conference call with a client in California ran late," he explained. "Please tell me I didn't miss anything important." "Just the usual morning chaos," Sarah said, handing him a travel mug of fresh coffee. "Emma's conference is at 3. Michael and Tyler are building a volcano, and Lucy wants to take her princess book to school." "Sounds like a normal Thursday," James said with a grin. "Chloe, 2 minutes until we need to leave for school." "Coming." Chloe's voice drifted down from upstairs. Sarah looked around the kitchen, taking in the controlled chaos of family life. Backpacks lined up by the door, lunch boxes on the counter, permission slips stuck to the refrigerator with magnets shaped like fruits. 3 weeks ago, she'd never imagined being part of something like this. It hadn't all been smooth sailing. The first week had been filled with small adjustments and awkward moments. Emma had a meltdown the third night, crying that she missed their old apartment and wanted to go home. Michael had gotten into a fight with Tyler over sharing video game time. Lucy had refused to sleep anywhere but on the floor next to Sarah's bed. But they'd worked through each challenge together. James had sat with Emma while she cried, listening to her fears about this new life without trying to fix them immediately. Sarah had helped the boys set up a gaming schedule that felt fair to both of them. And they'd gradually transitioned Lucy to sleeping in Chloe's room by letting her bring 3 stuffed animals and a nightlight shaped like a unicorn. The breakthrough had come at the end of the second week, when Michael got sick with a stomach bug. Sarah had been taking care of him, but she'd also been fighting her own bout of whatever he'd caught. James had stepped in without being asked, bringing Michael soup and crackers, reading to him when he couldn't sleep, and taking over the nighttime care so Sarah could rest. That's when Sarah realized this wasn't just a temporary arrangement anymore. It was becoming something deeper, something that looked and felt like a real family. "Sarah, have you seen my math folder?" Chloe asked as she finally appeared in the kitchen. "Check your backpack front pocket," Sarah suggested. "I saw you put it there last night after homework." Chloe unzipped the pocket and pulled out the folder with a relieved smile. "Found it. Thanks, Mom." And there it was again. The word that had started to feel natural coming from all the children. The title that Sarah was still getting used to but secretly treasured. "All right, troops," James said, checking his watch. "Time to move out. Tyler, Michael, grab your volcano supplies. Emma, do you have your library book? Chloe, show and tell bag." The children gathered their belongings with the practiced efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Sarah watched them line up by the door, her heart swelling with pride, and something that felt dangerously close to contentment. "I'll pick everyone up at 3:15, Sarah said. "Emma's conference is at 3, so I might be a few minutes late." "No problem," James said. "If you're running behind, just text me, and I'll get the kids from school." It was such a simple thing, having someone to share the logistical burden of child-rearing. Sarah had been doing everything alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have a partner in the daily work of parenting. After they left, Sarah cleaned up the breakfast dishes and started a load of laundry. The house felt different when the children were at school, quieter, but not empty. Their presence lingered in the toys scattered around the living room, the artwork hanging on the refrigerator, the 6 pairs of shoes lined up by the front door. James emerged from his office around 10, stretching his arms over his head. "Break time," he announced. "Want some more coffee?" They'd fallen into this routine over the past couple of weeks. Mid-morning coffee breaks where they checked in with each other about the kids, the house, and how their strange arrangement was working. "How's Emma feeling about the conference?" James asked as they sat at the kitchen table. "Nervous," Sarah admitted. "She's worried Mrs. Peterson doesn't like her because she started in the middle of the semester." "Mrs. Peterson loves her," James said confidently. "Tyler says she always uses Emma's math work as examples for the class." This was another thing that had surprised Sarah, how much James knew about her children's daily lives. He asked them about their days, helped with homework, knew which subjects they struggled with, and which ones came easily. He was as invested in their success as he was in Tyler and Chloe's. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Always. Do you ever regret this? Taking us in? I know it's been an adjustment, having 3 more people in your house, 3 more kids to worry about." James was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "You want the honest answer?" Sarah's stomach clenched. "Yes. There are moments when I look around at the chaos and think about how simple my life used to be. Just Tyler and Chloe and me, our quiet routines, our predictable days. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of that." Sarah felt her heart sink, but James wasn't finished. "But then I see Tyler teaching Michael to play baseball in the backyard, or I watch Chloe and Emma planning some elaborate art project, or Lucy climbs into my lap to read a story, and I realize that simple isn't always better. This house was too quiet before. We were a family, but we were also kind of isolated, just the 3 of us against the world." He smiled, looking around the kitchen with its cheerful mess of family life. "Now we're part of something bigger. The kids have siblings. I have help with everything from cooking to homework to remembering which kid needs what on which day. You've brought life back into this house in ways I didn't even realize we needed." Sarah felt tears welling up. "You've saved us," she said softly. "Not just from being homeless, but from feeling like we didn't belong anywhere." "You saved us too," James said. "You just don't realize it yet." The front door opened, interrupting their conversation. "Dad? Mom? I forgot my science notebook." Tyler's voice called from the entryway. "It's on the hall table," Sarah called back. "Right where you left it last night." "Thanks. Love you both." And then he was gone again, leaving Sarah and James looking at each other in the sudden quiet. "Love you both," James repeated softly. "Did you hear that?" Sarah had heard it. Tyler had said it so casually, so naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world that he loved both his dad and his mom, even though Sarah had only been his mom for 3 weeks. This is happening faster than I expected, Sarah said. Are you okay with that? Sarah thought about it. 3 weeks ago, she'd been desperate and homeless, willing to accept any help that kept her children safe. Now she was part of a family of 6, with children who called her mom, and a man who had become her partner in all the ways that mattered. Yes, she said. I think I am. The rest of the morning passed quickly. Sarah worked on organizing the storage room that was slowly being converted into a proper bedroom for when they needed more space. James had client calls. They moved around each other in the house with an ease that surprised them both, as if they'd been sharing space for years instead of weeks. At 2:30, Sarah left to pick up the children and attend Emma's conference. Mrs. Peterson was everything James had promised, kind, encouraging, and genuinely excited about Emma's progress. She's a bright girl, the teacher said. A little behind in reading because of the disruption in her schooling, but she's catching up quickly. And her math skills are excellent. She's been through a lot lately, Sarah said carefully. James mentioned that you'd had some family changes. Emma seems to be adjusting well. She talks about her new brothers and sister all the time, Tyler and Chloe and Michael and Lucy. She clearly loves her big family. Big family. That's what they were now, Sarah realized. Not James and his kids plus Sarah and her kids, but one big family of 6. After the conference, Sarah collected all the children from their various classrooms and activities. The car ride home was filled with chatter about their days. Tyler's successful volcano demonstration, Emma's gold star on her spelling test, Chloe's excitement about being chosen as line leader, Michael's pride in helping a classmate with math, Lucy's successful show and tell presentation. Mom, Emma said as they pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Peterson said she wants to meet Dad at the next school event. I told her he's the best dad ever, even though he wasn't my dad at first. Even though he wasn't your dad at first. The casual way Emma said it, like acquiring a new father was the most natural thing in the world, made Sarah's chest tight with emotion. They walked into the house together, all 6 of them, loud and chaotic and wonderfully, completely normal. James emerged from his office to hear about their days, and within minutes the children had scattered to homework and play and the million small tasks that filled their after-school hours. How did the conference go? James asked Sarah quietly as she started dinner preparations. Great. Mrs. Peterson loves Emma. She wants to meet you at the next school event. I'd like that, James said. I'd like to meet all their teachers, actually. If that's okay with you. If that's okay with you. He still asked permission for things like this, still respected her role as their mother even as he took on more and more of a father role in their daily lives. More than okay, Sarah said. They'd love that. As if summoned by their conversation, all 4 children appeared in the kitchen. Can we work on our volcano in the garage? Tyler asked. We want to test it before we turn it in tomorrow. Can we help? Emma added. Chloe and me want to see it erupt. Lucy and I, Sarah corrected automatically. Lucy and I, Emma repeated with a grin. 20 minutes later, they were all crowded into the garage, watching Tyler and Michael's volcano bubble and foam with impressive results. The children cheered and applauded, and James took pictures with his phone while Sarah tried not to worry about the mess they were making. Best volcano ever, Chloe declared. We should do the solar system next, Lucy suggested. That's not until next month, Michael said. But we could start planning it. Sarah watched her son, her quiet, serious boy who had been trying to be the man of the family at age 6, now laughing and planning projects with his new brother. The weight he'd been carrying for months had lifted from his small shoulders, and he was just a kid again. Dinner in 30 minutes, Sarah announced. Everyone wash up. As they headed back into the house, James fell into step beside her. 3 weeks, he said quietly. 3 weeks, she agreed. Feels longer, doesn't it? Sarah looked around at their chaotic, wonderful, impossible family. Feels like this is how it's always been. And maybe that was the most surprising thing of all. Not that it was working, but that it felt so natural, so right, so much like home that she could barely remember what life had been like before that rainy night when she'd knocked on James Cooper's door with 3 scared children and nowhere else to go. Now they had somewhere to go every day. Home to each other. Home to this house full of laughter and homework battles and bedtime stories and all the beautiful, messy complications of family life. 3 weeks ago, she'd been hoping for one night of safety. Now she was living in the middle of a miracle she hadn't even known how to ask for. Sarah woke to the sound of children laughing in the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then, the events of the night before came flooding back. She was in James Cooper's guest room, in a house that smelled like safety, with her children sleeping peacefully beside her for the first time in weeks. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and she could hear Tyler's voice explaining something enthusiastically to what sounded like Michael. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted down the hallway, making her stomach growl. Emma stirred next to her, then sat up and looked around with wide eyes. "Mama, we're still here," she whispered, like she couldn't quite believe it. "We're still here," Sarah confirmed, smoothing her daughter's tangled hair. Michael rolled over and blinked sleepily. "I can hear Tyler talking about video games," he said. "He said he'd teach me today. Can we stay forever, Mama?" Lucy asked, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. Her curly hair was sticking up in every direction, making her look like a tiny dandelion. "Forever." Sarah's heart ached at the innocence in her youngest daughter's voice, the simple belief that good things could last if you wanted them badly enough. "Let's get dressed and have some breakfast," Sarah said, avoiding the question for now. "Then, we'll talk about what happens next." They found James in the kitchen, standing at the stove with Chloe perched on the counter beside him, both of them wearing matching aprons that said, "World's Best Chef." Tyler was sitting at the table with a plate of pancakes, talking animatedly to no one in particular about the differences between various Pokemon types. "Good morning," James said when he saw them. "I hope you're hungry." Chloe insisted we make enough breakfast for an army. "I made the pancakes special," Chloe announced proudly. "Daddy let me crack the eggs and everything." "They look wonderful," Sarah said, and meant it. The kitchen table was set for 6, with a stack of perfectly golden pancakes in the center, alongside bacon, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit cut into neat pieces. "Can Michael sit next to me?" Tyler asked. "I want to tell him about my Pokemon cards." "I want to sit by Emma," Chloe added. "We're going to plan our princess castle." Sarah watched her children settle into chairs around the table like they'd been doing it their whole lives. Emma smiled shyly at Tyler as he showed her one of his Pokemon cards. Michael listened with rapt attention as Tyler explained the rules of some games Sarah had never heard of. Lucy immediately started chattering to Chloe about braids and princesses and whether she could have strawberries on her pancakes. "Coffee?" James asked, holding up the pot. "Please," Sarah said gratefully. She needed caffeine to process what she was about to do. As they ate breakfast, Sarah studied the family dynamic around the table. James was patient with all the children, answering questions and mediating small disputes with the ease of someone who'd been doing this for a long time. Tyler and Chloe were clearly used to including others. They made sure Emma, Michael, and Lucy had everything they needed without being asked. This felt like a real family breakfast, not 5 strangers sharing a meal. "Daddy," Chloe said around a mouthful of pancakes, "can Emma and Lucy and Michael stay today? We were going to build a fort in the backyard." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "And I want to teach Michael how to play my new video game. It has dragons in it." "That depends on Emma and Lucy and Michael's mom," James said carefully. "This is their decision to make." All eyes turned to Sarah. She could see hope in her children's faces, the first real hope they'd shown in weeks. They wanted to stay. They wanted this house and these new friends and the feeling of belonging somewhere. But Sarah needed to be smart about this. She needed to think like a mother, not like a desperate woman who'd been offered a lifeline. "Kids, I need to talk to you about something important," she said. "Can we go sit in the living room for a few minutes?" James seemed to understand. "Tyler, Chloe, why don't you help me clean up these dishes? We can work on our fort later." Sarah led her children to the living room and sat them down on the couch. In the morning light, she could see how much better they looked already. Their faces had color again, their eyes were brighter, and they seemed more like themselves than they had in weeks. "Mr. James asked if we'd like to stay here for a while," she began. "Not just for today, but for longer, until Mama can find a new job and we can get our own place again." Emma's face lit up. "Really? We could stay here. But I need to know what you think about that," Sarah continued. "This would be a big change. We'd be living with people we just met, in a house that isn't ours. It might feel strange at first. Michael, always the practical one, asked, would we go to school here? Yes, the same school Tyler goes to. Would we have our own beds? Sarah realized she didn't know the answer to that. I'm not sure about all the details yet. We need to talk to Mr. James about things like that. I like it here, Lucy said simply. It feels safe. Safe. There was that word again, the one that had been missing from their vocabulary for so long. I like it too, Emma added quietly. And I like Tyler and Chloe. They're nice to us. Michael was quiet for a moment, then said, Mama, if we stay here, does that mean we're not poor anymore? The question broke Sarah's heart. Michael was only 6, but he'd absorbed so much of their stress and uncertainty over the past month. He shouldn't have to worry about whether they were poor. We'll still be figuring things out, she said honestly. But we won't be homeless. We'll have a warm place to sleep and food to eat while Mama finds work. I think we should stay, Michael said decisively. Mr. James is nice, and Tyler said he'd teach me to ride his bike. Me too, Emma agreed. I want to go to real school again. Me three, Lucy added, not wanting to be left out. Sarah looked at their faces, saw the hope and excitement there, and knew she couldn't take this away from them. Not when they'd been through so much darkness lately. Okay, she said. If Mr. James is still willing, we'll stay for a while and see how it works out. The children cheered, and Lucy threw herself into Sarah's arms. Thank you, Mama. You're the best mama in the whole world. If only that were true, Sarah thought. The best mama in the world wouldn't have let her children end up homeless in the first place. They returned to the kitchen to find James loading the dishwasher while Tyler and Chloe sorted through a box of Legos on the floor. We've talked about it, Sarah said. If you're still serious about your offer, we'd like to stay. James smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'm very serious. And I'm glad. We need to talk about the details, Sarah said. Sleeping arrangements, house rules, how this is going to work practically. Of course. Tyler, Chloe, why don't you take Emma, Michael, and Lucy outside to see the backyard? We can work on that fort you've been planning. As the children ran outside, their excited voices fading into the distance, James and Sarah sat back down at the kitchen table. First, sleeping arrangements, James said. The guest room is fine for now, but if this is going to be longer term, we should think about something more permanent. There's another bedroom upstairs that we use for storage. It would need some work, but we could turn it into a proper kids' room. I can help with that, Sarah said quickly. I'm good with organizing and cleaning. And I was thinking, if you're comfortable with it, Emma could share Chloe's room. They seem to be getting along well, and Chloe has bunk beds. Michael could share with Tyler. His room is big enough for a second bed. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. Her children had never slept separately from her, not since David left. The thought of them scattered throughout the house made her nervous. James seemed to sense her hesitation. Or we could set up the storage room as one big kids' room where they could all stay together. Whatever makes you more comfortable. Let's see how they feel about it, Sarah said. Maybe we could try the shared rooms and see if it works. House rules, James continued. I'm pretty laid back, but I have a few non-negotiables. No lying, no hitting. Everyone helps with chores appropriate to their age. Homework gets done before TV or video games. We eat dinner together as a family when possible. These all seemed reasonable. What about discipline? If one of my kids acts up, we'll figure it out together. You're their parent, so ultimately any major decisions are yours. But if I'm watching them and they misbehave, I need to be able to correct them in the moment. Sarah nodded. This was harder than she'd expected, these practical conversations about blending their families. But James seemed thoughtful about it, respectful of her role as a mother while acknowledging the realities of their situation. Now work, James said. I meant what I said about helping with the household stuff. I travel occasionally for client meetings, sometimes overnight. If you could watch Tyler and Chloe during those times, it would save me a fortune in babysitter costs. And, honestly, having someone else here to share the load of cooking and cleaning and school pickup would be incredible. What about pay? James shook his head. Room and board for you and your kids. Plus I'll cover reasonable expenses like toiletries, clothes for the kids when they outgrow what they have, school supplies, that kind of thing. If you want spending money beyond that, we can figure something out, but I don't want you to feel like a hired employee. I want you to feel like part of the family. Part of the family. Sarah had to blink back tears. When was the last time she'd felt like she belonged somewhere? There's one more thing we need to discuss, James said quietly. I know you don't know me well, and you're trusting me with your children's safety. If anything ever makes you uncomfortable, if I ever say or do anything that seems inappropriate, I want you to tell me immediately. Your comfort and your kids' safety are the most important things. The fact that he brought this up without being asked told Sarah a lot about his character. A man with bad intentions wouldn't think to have this conversation. Thank you, she said. That means a lot. They were interrupted by a crash from the backyard, followed by Tyler's voice saying, It's okay. Nothing's broken. James and Sarah looked at each other and laughed. I should probably go check on them, Sarah said. They're fine, James said. Kids are tougher than we think. Besides, they need to learn to play together without us hovering. He was right, but Sarah's instinct was still to rush outside and make sure everyone was okay. She'd been in crisis mode for so long that it was hard to relax her vigilance. This is going to take some getting used to, she admitted. For all of us, James agreed. We're basically creating a blended family overnight. There are going to be bumps and adjustments and probably some moments where we wonder what we've gotten ourselves into. Are you having second thoughts? No, James said firmly. Are you? Sarah looked out the window at her children, who were running around the backyard with Tyler and Chloe, their faces bright with laughter. Emma was chasing Tyler with what looked like a foam sword while Michael and Lucy tried to build something with sticks. Chloe was directing the construction project with the authority of an experienced engineer. No, she said. No second thoughts. But, even as she said it, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Living together, day after day, dealing with sick kids and homework battles and the inevitable conflicts that came with family life, that would be the real test. For now, though, it was enough that her children were playing in a safe backyard, that there was food in the refrigerator, and that they had a warm place to sleep tonight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they'd face them from a position of stability instead of desperation. And maybe, if they were very lucky, this strange arrangement would grow into something even better than either of them could imagine. Something that looked an awful lot like home. Sarah stared at James like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. Stay until she got back on her feet? People didn't make offers like that to strangers. There had to be a catch, some hidden agenda she wasn't seeing. I don't understand, she said carefully. You don't even know us. James poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. The warmth felt good in her hands, which were still cold from their hours in the rain. You're right, I don't know you well. But I know enough. I know you're a mother who would rather swallow her pride and ask a stranger for help than let her children spend the night in the cold. I know your kids are polite and well-behaved, which tells me you're a good parent. And I know that sometimes good people hit rough patches through no fault of their own. Sarah sipped the coffee, trying to process what he was saying. But what about your kids? Tyler and Chloe? You can't just bring strange people into their home. They're not strange people to Tyler and Chloe anymore, James said with a small smile. Did you see how they played together tonight? Chloe asked me if Emma and Lucy could be her new sisters. Tyler wants to teach Michael how to ride his bike tomorrow. The image of Michael learning to ride a bike made Sarah's chest ache. David had promised to teach him before he left. Another broken promise in a long line of them. This is insane, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. You can't just invite homeless people to move in with you. Why not? The simple question caught her off guard. Why not? Because it wasn't normal. Because people didn't do things like this. Because there had to be a reason he was being so kind, and it probably wasn't a good one. Because, she said weakly. James sat down across from her at the kitchen table. Sarah, can I ask you something? She nodded. If the situation were reversed, if you had a stable home and income, and you found me on your doorstep with Tyler and Chloe, cold and hungry with nowhere to go, what would you do? Sarah didn't have to think about it. I'd bring you in. I'd feed you, let you stay until you figured things out. She paused. But that's different. How is it different? She struggled to find an answer that made sense. Because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to need help. And you don't think I do? James was quiet for a moment, looking out the window where the rain continued to fall. After Linda died, I went through some dark times. Really dark. I had insurance money and a good job, So we weren't homeless, but emotionally, I was completely lost. I didn't know how to cook for the kids, how to do Chloe's hair, how to help Tyler with his nightmares. Sarah could see the pain in his eyes as he remembered. My family lived too far away to help regularly. Linda's family blamed me for the accident, said if I hadn't been working late that night, she wouldn't have been driving to pick up dinner. The neighbors were nice, but everyone has their own lives. I was drowning, and I couldn't see a way out. He looked back at her. Mrs. Patterson saved us, not just with the food, but with her presence. She showed me that accepting help wasn't weakness, it was survival. And that sometimes helping someone else is how we heal ourselves. Sarah felt tears welling up again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than she had in years. I still don't understand why you take such a risk, she said. What if we're not who you think we are? What if I'm lying about everything? James shrugged. Then, I'll deal with that if it happens. But my gut tells me you're exactly who you seem to be. A good mother who's had some bad luck. Bad luck. Sarah almost laughed. My husband abandoned us. I lost my job. We got evicted. And I ended up begging strangers for shelter. That's not bad luck. That's a complete life failure. No, James said firmly. That's a series of things that happened to you, not because of you. There's a difference. Sarah wanted to believe him, but the voice in her head that sounded like David kept whispering that this was all her fault somehow. If she'd been a better wife, David wouldn't have left. If she'd been a better employee, she would have seen the restaurant closing coming and found another job first. If she'd been a better person, none of this would have happened. I can see you arguing with yourself, James said gently. Someone convinced you that you deserve what happened to you. That's not true. How do you know? Because I've met your children. Kids don't turn out like Emma, Michael, and Lucy unless they have a mother who loves them fiercely and puts them first. A bad person doesn't end up on a stranger's doorstep because she chose her children's food over her rent money. The truth of what he was saying hit her like a physical blow. She had chosen her children's food over the rent. She'd made that choice without hesitation, knowing it would lead to eviction. What kind of bad person does that? Okay, she said quietly. Let's say I believe you. And I'm not a terrible person who deserves this. Why would you want us to stay? What do you get out of it? James considered this. Honestly, I think Tyler and Chloe need you as much as you need us. They've been the only kids in this house for 5 years. They're both a little shy, don't have many friends. Tonight was the first time I've seen them this excited and social in a long time. He was right. Sarah had noticed how easily her children had bonded with his, how naturally they'd fallen into play together. Emma, who had been withdrawn and anxious for weeks, had been giggling and sharing stories. Michael had relaxed his constant vigilance over his sisters. Lucy had been herself again, bubbly and affectionate, and for years old. Plus, James continued, this house is too big for just the 3 of us. It was Linda's dream house, and after she died, I couldn't bring myself to sell it. But it's meant for a big family. Having you here would make it feel like a home again instead of just a place where we sleep. Sarah looked around the kitchen, really seeing it for the first time. It was beautiful, but also lived in. Children's artwork hung on the refrigerator next to grocery lists and soccer schedules. A pile of clean laundry sat in a basket on the counter, waiting to be folded. School permission slips were scattered next to the fruit bowl. This was what a home looked like. Not perfect, but full of life and love and the beautiful mess of family. What would the arrangement be? She asked, hardly believing she was considering this. I can't pay rent right now, and I won't be a charity case. You wouldn't be a charity case, James said. Look, I work from home doing software consulting, which is great for being available for the kids, but terrible for keeping up with household stuff. I can barely manage laundry and grocery shopping, let alone actual cooking or cleaning or any of the domestic things Linda used to handle. Sarah started to see where he was going with this. If you're looking for work, maybe you could handle some of those things in exchange for room and board, help with meals, keep the house running, maybe watch Tyler and Chloe when I have client meetings or need to travel for work. It wasn't charity. It was a job, a place to live, and a way to contribute that would let her keep her dignity. What about school for the kids? Tyler goes to Riverside Elementary, just 4 blocks away. They have a great program, and I'm sure we could get Emma, Michael, and Lucy enrolled. The principal, Mrs. Davis, is very understanding about unusual circumstances. School. Real school, not the spotty attendance they'd managed the past month when Sarah was between addresses. Emma loved learning, and Michael was so smart it sometimes scared Sarah. Lucy was already counting and knew most of her letters. "This is crazy," Sarah said again. But this time it sounded more like wonder than disbelief. "Maybe," James agreed. "But sometimes the best things in life are a little crazy." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the rain against the windows and the soft sounds of sleeping children from down the hall. Sarah tried to imagine what it would be like to wake up here tomorrow, to make breakfast in this kitchen, to help her kids get ready for school in a place where they felt safe. "I need to ask you something," she said finally. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." James nodded. "Is this really about helping us, or are you looking for something else? A relationship, or I need to know if you have expectations beyond what you're saying." James met her eyes directly. "I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm not ready for that. And even if I were, you're in a vulnerable position right now. That wouldn't be fair to either of us. This is about helping a family that needs help and filling a house that's too empty. Nothing more, nothing less." Sarah believed him. Something in his voice, in the way he'd interacted with her children, in the gentle way he'd handled this entire impossible situation, told her he was telling the truth. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course. Sleep on it. Talk to your kids. This is a big decision for all of us." Sarah finished her coffee and stood up. "James, regardless of what I decide, I want you to know that what you've done tonight, giving us shelter and safety when we had nowhere else to turn, it's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for my family. I'll never forget that." "You don't need to forget it," he said. "Just remember it when you have the chance to help someone else someday." Sarah went to check on her children before heading to the shower. They were curled up together in the big bed, Emma's arm protectively around Lucy, while Michael slept on his back, looking more peaceful than he had in weeks. For the first time since their eviction, they looked like children instead of refugees. The shower was a luxury she hadn't experienced in days. Hot water, real soap that smelled like lavender, shampoo that made her hair feel clean again. She stood under the spray until the bathroom filled with steam, washing away days of stress and fear and uncertainty. When she looked in the mirror afterward, she saw herself clearly for the first time in weeks. She was thinner than she should be, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines that hadn't been there a month ago. But she was still here, still fighting, still putting one foot in front of the other for her children. Maybe James was right. Maybe this wasn't about what she deserved or didn't deserve. Maybe sometimes bad things happened to good people, and sometimes other good people stepped in to help. Maybe that was just how the world worked when you let it. She climbed into bed next to her children, listening to their steady breathing in the dark. Outside, the storm was starting to calm, and she could see stars peeking through the clouds. Tomorrow, she would have to make a decision that could change everything for her family. Stay in this house with this kind man and his children, try to build something new from the wreckage of their old life. Or leave, go back to shelters and uncertainty and the constant fear of not being able to provide for her children. When she thought about it that way, it wasn't really a decision at all. But first, she needed to talk to Emma, Michael, and Lucy. They'd been through enough upheaval without having their future decided for them. They deserved a voice in what came next. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah realized something had changed in her chest. The tight knot of panic and desperation that had lived there for weeks was starting to loosen. Not gone. She wasn't naive enough to think one night of kindness solved all their problems, but looser. Maybe that's what hope felt like. Maybe it wasn't the sudden, bright flash she'd expected, but this gentle easing, this quiet belief that tomorrow might be better than today. In the morning, she would find out if her children felt the same way. The last thing Sarah heard before sleep took her was the soft sound of Tyler's voice drifting from the next room. He was talking to someone, probably his dad, saying something about teaching Michael to play video games and asking if they could make pancakes for breakfast. It sounded like home. It sounded like possibility. It sounded like the beginning of something beautiful and terrifying and completely unexpected. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, her children were safe and warm and dreaming peaceful dreams in a house where someone had looked at their need and said, "You're all home now." Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The rain fell like bullets against Sarah Mitchell's thin jacket as she stood on the porch of 1247 Maple Street. Her 3 children huddled behind her legs like baby birds seeking shelter from a storm. 8-year-old Emma pressed her face against Sarah's hip, trying to hide from the cold wind that cut through their worn clothes. 6-year-old Michael held tight to his mother's free hand while balancing 4-year-old Lucy on his other arm, even though she was getting too heavy for him to carry. Sarah stared at the wooden door in front of her. The paint was fresh and white, and a small welcome mat sat neatly beneath her feet. Through the window, she could see warm yellow lights spilling from what looked like a kitchen. The smell of something cooking drifted out, making her empty stomach twist with hunger. She hadn't eaten anything real in 2 days, just crackers she'd found in her purse and water from gas station bathrooms. Her hand shook as she reached for the doorbell. This was crazy. She knew it was crazy. You don't just show up at a stranger's house with 3 kids and nowhere else to go. But she'd tried everything else. The homeless shelter was full. The churches were closed until morning. Her ex-husband had made sure she couldn't access their bank account, and her sister lived 3 states away with no money to help. The eviction notice in her pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. 3 days. That's all the landlord had given her when she couldn't make rent. 3 days to figure out how to keep her babies safe and fed. Today was day 3. Emma tugged on her mother's wet jeans. "Mama, I'm cold," she whispered. Sarah looked down at her daughter's pale face. Emma's lips had a blue tint that scared her. Michael wasn't much better, and Lucy had stopped crying about an hour ago, which worried Sarah more than if she'd been screaming. Quiet meant Lucy was giving up, and 4-year-olds should never have to give up on anything. "I know, baby," Sarah whispered back. "Mama's going to fix this." She had no idea how she was going to fix anything. 3 weeks ago, her life had been normal. Not perfect, but normal. She'd had a job at the diner downtown, a small apartment that stayed warm, and enough food to keep her children's bellies full. Then, everything went wrong all at once, like dominoes falling in a line. First, the diner closed without warning. The owner just put a sign on the door saying they were done. 37 people lost their jobs that day, including Sarah. She tried to find another job right away, but everywhere wanted someone who could start immediately and work any hours. Hard to do when you have 3 small children and no money for childcare. Then, David, her ex-husband, decided he didn't want to pay child support anymore. He moved to another state and changed his phone number. The court said they'd help her track him down, but that would take months. Months she didn't have. The apartment rent came due, and Sarah had to choose between paying it and buying food. She chose food, thinking she could explain to the landlord, maybe work out a payment plan. Mr. Rodriguez had always been nice before, but when she knocked on his door, his wife answered and said he'd sold the building. The new owners didn't care about her situation. Now here she was, standing in front of a house she'd picked because the lights were on, and she could hear children laughing inside. She'd walked past it before when taking the kids to the park. A swing set sat in the backyard, and she'd seen a man pushing kids on it. He'd seemed kind then, patient with the children as they demanded higher and faster. The door had a small window at the top. Through it, Sarah could see part of a living room with toys scattered on the floor. A large couch sat against one wall, and she could make out the edge of what looked like a television playing cartoons. It looked like home. It looked safe. Michael shifted Lucy in his arms, and Sarah realized she was taking too long. Her son was only 6, but he'd been trying to be the man of the family since David left. He shouldn't have to do that. None of them should have to do any of this. Sarah raised her hand and knocked. The sound echoed against the door like a gunshot in the quiet evening. Inside, she heard footsteps approaching. A man's voice said something she couldn't understand, and then the door opened. He was tall, maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes and paint stains on his shirt. His brown hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it while working on something. Behind him, Sarah could see 2 children peeking around the corner. A boy who looked about Emma's age and a girl who might have been Lucy's size. "Can I help you?" the man asked. His voice was gentle, not annoyed or suspicious like Sarah had expected. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What do you say in this situation? How do you ask a complete stranger to save your family? The man noticed her children then, saw how they shivered in their thin clothes, how Emma's teeth chattered, how Michael struggled to keep holding Lucy. His expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Are you all okay?" he asked. That's when Sarah started crying. Not the pretty tears you see in movies, but the ugly, desperate sobs of a mother who'd run out of options. The words tumbled out between gasps. "I'm sorry. I know this is crazy. I don't even know you. But we don't have anywhere else to go. They evicted us today, and the shelter's full, and my babies are so cold, and I don't know what to do." The man stepped forward, not backward like she'd expected. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, coming out of the rain. He opened the door wider and gestured for them to enter. Sarah hesitated for a moment. Stranger danger, her mind whispered. But her children were freezing, and sometimes you had to choose between different kinds of dangerous. She stepped inside, and her children followed like a line of ducklings. The warmth hit them immediately. Emma sighed with relief, and Lucy lifted her head from Michael's shoulder for the first time in an hour. The house smelled like dinner and laundry detergent, and something else Sarah couldn't identify at first. Then she realized what it was: safety. It smelled like safety. "I'm James," the man said, closing the door behind them. "James Cooper." "Sarah," she managed. "Sarah Mitchell. These are my kids, Emma, Michael, and Lucy." James crouched down so he was at eye level with the children. "Hi there," he said to them. "I'm glad you're here where it's warm." His own children appeared from around the corner. The boy looked exactly like James, with the same brown hair and kind eyes. The girl had blonde hair and pigtails, and was missing her 2 front teeth. "This is my son Tyler and my daughter Chloe," James said. "Tyler's 8, and Chloe just turned 5. Emma peeked out from behind Sarah's legs. "I'm 8 too," she whispered. "No way," Tyler said with a grin. "Do you like Pokemon?" Emma nodded shyly. "Cool. I have like 1,000,000 Pokemon cards upstairs." Lucy had perked up at the mention of the 5-year-old girl. "I like your pretty hair," she told Chloe. Chloe beamed. "Thank you. Daddy did my braids this morning. Do you want me to do yours?" Sarah watched this exchange with wonder. Her children, who had been silent and scared for days, were already starting to relax. James seemed to understand this too. "Are you hungry?" he asked Sarah. "I was just making dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, but there's plenty." Sarah's stomach growled so loud it was embarrassing. "We don't want to impose," she said automatically. "You're not imposing," James said firmly. "When's the last time you all ate?" Sarah thought about lying, but she was too tired. "Yesterday morning." The kids had cereal. James's face darkened, not with anger at her, but with anger at the situation. "Then, we're definitely eating," he said. "Tyler, Chloe, why don't you show our new friends where the bathroom is so they can wash up? Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. As the children headed down the hallway together, chattering quietly, Sarah found herself alone with James. The weight of what she was doing hit her again. "I'm not crazy," she said quickly. "I mean, I know this looks crazy, showing up at your door like this, but I'm not some kind of con artist or drug addict or anything. Everything fell apart so fast." James held up a hand to stop her. "You don't need to explain anything right now," he said. "You're here, your kids are safe and warm, and that's what matters. Everything else we can figure out later." Later. He said later like there was going to be a later, like this wasn't just a one-night thing before he called social services or the police. Sarah wanted to believe him, but life had taught her not to trust easy promises. "I should probably call someone," she said. "My sister, or maybe see if the shelter has any openings now." "In this weather?" James looked toward the window where rain was still pelting the glass. "It's supposed to storm all night. Why don't you and the kids stay here tonight? And tomorrow we can figure out next steps. Stay here, in this warm house that smelled like safety and spaghetti sauce, with a man who talked to her children like they mattered, who didn't look at her like she was a failure for ending up on his doorstep." "I can pay you," Sarah said desperately. "I have $43 and some change. I know it's not much, but keep your money," James said gently. "You're going to need it." From the bathroom came the sound of children giggling. Emma's laugh, which Sarah hadn't heard in weeks, mixed with Tyler's and Chloe's and Michael's. Lucy was saying something about soap that made them all crack up. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked. "You don't know us. We could be anyone." James was quiet for a moment, stirring the spaghetti sauce on the stove. 5 years ago, my wife died in a car accident, he said finally. Tyler was 3, Chloe was just a baby. I thought my world was ending. Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. The day we got home from the funeral, I was sitting on my front steps, crying, trying to figure out how I was going to raise 2 kids by myself. This elderly woman from down the street, Mrs. Patterson, came walking up with a casserole dish. He smiled at the memory. She said, "I don't know much about raising children, but I know everyone's got to eat." She brought us dinner every night for 2 months. Never asked for anything back. Never made me feel like a charity case. Just showed up with food, and sometimes stayed to hold Chloe while I figured out how to be a single dad. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mrs. Patterson passed away last year, James continued. Before she died, she told me that helping us helped her too. Said it gave her purpose during a time when she felt useless. I think about that a lot. He turned to face Sarah fully. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just a guy who remembers what it feels like to need help and not know where to find it. If I can pass along some of the kindness that got me through the hardest time of my life, then maybe Mrs. Patterson's legacy lives on a little longer. The children came tumbling back into the kitchen, their faces clean and their spirits obviously lifted. Emma had taken her hair out of its messy ponytail, and Chloe was already working on braiding it. Michael looked less burdened somehow, like sharing the weight of watching his sisters had given him permission to be 6 years old again. Lucy was holding Tyler's hand and chattering about something with the enthusiasm only little kids could muster. "Daddy, can we eat in the living room?" Chloe asked. "Like a picnic?" "Please," Tyler added. "We want to show them our fort." James looked at Sarah, who nodded. She would have agreed to eat standing on their heads if it meant her children stayed this happy and warm. They spread blankets on the living room floor and ate spaghetti and meatballs while watching cartoons. The kids sat in a circle, sharing stories and jokes like they'd known each other their whole lives. Sarah sat on the couch, watching them, still hardly believing this was real. James sat beside her with his own plate. "They're good kids," he said quietly. "They are," Sarah agreed. "They've been through so much these past few weeks, but they never complain. They just adapt. Kids are stronger than we think sometimes," James said. "And so are their moms." Sarah didn't feel strong. She felt like she was barely holding on by a thread. But watching her children laugh and play and act like children again, maybe strength wasn't about not breaking. Maybe it was about keeping going even when you did break. After dinner, the kids built a massive fort out of couch cushions and blankets. Emma and Tyler discovered they both loved drawing and spent an hour working on a picture together. Michael taught Chloe how to make paper airplanes. Lucy fell asleep curled up in the middle of the fort, finally, looking peaceful. "I should get them settled somewhere," Sarah said, not wanting to overstay their welcome. "The guest room has a queen bed," James said. "It's not huge, but it should fit everyone. There are extra blankets in the closet, and I put some clothes in there that might fit the kids. My neighbor's daughter outgrew them, and she was going to donate them anyway." More kindness. Sarah didn't know how to process it all. They got the children ready for bed, brushing teeth with extra toothbrushes James seemed to magically produce, changing into pajamas that actually fit. Emma whispered to Sarah that Tyler had promised to show her his Pokemon card collection in the morning. Michael asked if he could help James make breakfast. Lucy wanted to know if Chloe could teach her how to braid hair like a princess. When all 3 children were finally settled in the big bed, looking smaller and more fragile in the oversized guest room, Sarah tucked them in with the care of someone who wasn't sure when she'd get to do it in safety again. "Mama," Emma whispered as Sarah kissed her forehead. "Is this our new home?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Just for tonight, sweetheart. I like it here," Emma said sleepily. "It feels safe." "Yes," Sarah thought as she turned off the light. "It does feel safe." She found James in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate for what he'd given them, but they were all she had. "You're welcome," he said simply. "There are towels in the bathroom down the hall if you want a shower. And help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you get hungry later." Sarah nodded, but she didn't move to leave. "James, I need you to know that I'm not looking for a handout. I'm not trying to take advantage of your kindness. I needed one night where my kids could feel safe." Tomorrow I'll figure out what comes next. James finished loading the last plate and closed the dishwasher. What if I told you that tomorrow doesn't have to mean leaving? Sarah's heart stopped. What do you mean? He turned to face her, leaning against the counter. I mean, what if this wasn't just for one night? What if you stayed until you got back on your feet? The offer hung in the air between them, too good to be true and too necessary to ignore. Sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen when we least expect them. Picture this. A woman standing at a stranger's door in the pouring rain, 3 small children clinging to her soaked dress, nowhere else to turn. She's about to discover that some people are willing to change everything for someone they've never met before. This isn't just another feel-good story. This is about what happens when desperation meets unexpected kindness, when a single decision changes 5 lives forever, and when home becomes something entirely different than 4 walls and a roof. What would you do if someone showed up at your door with nothing but hope and 3 scared children? Most of us like to think we'd help, but few of us ever get tested. This story is about a man who passed that test in ways that will restore your faith in humanity. Get ready for a journey that proves miracles aren't just found in movies. Sometimes they happen right outside our front door, wrapped in the most ordinary moments that turn out to be anything but ordinary.